Alrighty guys, hello and welcome back to the show. Today we're doing a replay review for you guys. This was submitted by Depete. He sent this replay. It's a ladder match on Mentor, which I actually really like this map. It's a really fun map. Lots of good avenues of attack, lots of good ways to bypass and flank your opponent. Kind of reminds me of that Emerald Terraces map from the ladder a couple months ago. But good map, lots of good mass, lots of good expansion points, so lots of potential for some really interesting stuff. Depete sent this to me with a couple of notes. He said that he had identified some problems in the replay, and the ones that he listed were, if I remember correctly, he wasn't producing engineers consistently to rebuild from raiding. He had a pretty big mass stall apparently at some point in this game, and was built too many T2 support factories. So we'll go ahead and look at those. Right off the bat though, those problems that you're mentioning to me sound like symptoms of a deeper problem. I think that those are not necessarily the problems themselves, but problems from problems from decisions that you may have made earlier on in the game that caused you to experience those things later on in the game. Because Supreme Commander is one of those games where if you make a bad decision earlier on in the game, it can kind of compound and snowball to an effect where you start feeling much larger ramifications later on in the game. So we have Depete over here. So right off the bat, well, you've got raiding party here that's sitting there doing nothing. Okay, good. These guys move out. So you need to get these guys going as quickly as possible, because with a 20 by 20 map, they need to be like running their little feed over to the other side as quickly as possible. Your commander is also walking around at the starting location. For this particular starting location, it's possible, I think, to build almost everything without your commander walking, or walking very little from an initial build order perspective. So it does look like you have a couple of more distancy builds going on, so that's good to see. But try and fine tune that on your start. You're going first land, and then 4 power generator. No, I think your build order, if I remember correctly, I did watch this replay at a high speed earlier on, but I think your build order was land factory, 2 power generators, then 2 mexes, 2 power generators, and 2 mexes again. That's a build order for not having a hydro at the start, which is fine. I mean, your hydro is really far away, so that's perfectly fine. I think that just keeping your commander in one spot while you're building is going to help you build things a little bit faster. Raiding party out, which is good. This engineer is expanding to this mass extraction point, or mass extraction kind of cluster. You got this guy. What's this guy doing? This guy he's got no additional orders. So I would have this guy continue building mexes down this flank. Give these initial engineers long starting build orders. That way you don't have to continue micromanaging them. So yeah, instead of just building these 2, you can have him then transition to building those 3 as well. Last thing I think I'll say about the build order is hydro is only being built by 1 engineer, which we talked about this on the channel a couple times in the past. I don't think this is ideal. Based on how you built out your initial base, it's not killing you. As you can see, you're not stalling for energy, but sending 2 engineers would be better. The other thing is you have this engineer on a patrol route doing reclaim, and I think that this engineer could be used instead on an expansion route. And you could use this engineer after he's done building the hydro to run reclaim on these rocks and these trees. Right now he's just kind of sitting there doing nothing. Okay, so I want to keep an eye on your economy, because you said that you mass stalled later in the game. And usually if you're mass stalling whenever you make the jump from T1 to T2, so you said you had T2 support factories, or too many T2 support factories. So I'm guessing that those T2 support factories are what caused your mass stall. And normally, in my experience, if you are running into stalls from as you jump or make the transition from T1 to T2, it is because you did not effectively use reclaim to upgrade initial mass extraction points to T2. So for this, I mean, you're keeping everything relatively level. You are floating a good amount of mass. But I think that right now, if you build some more power generators, which you are doing right now, so after these 4 power generators, or maybe a few more, I think that you could start jumping these mexes to T2, and yeah, now you're actually really floating a lot of mass. So once this fills up, this is important to understand. This is not like Age of Empires or Sins of a Solar Empire or other real-time strategy games where your stockpiles are effectively infinite. You have a limited amount of storage, and this is what I love about this game. I was actually talking about this with a viewer in the comments on one of my last videos, but what I love about this game is the balancing act from the economy. It's incredibly realistic because you can start construction on something whenever you don't necessarily have all the resources in your stockpile, which I love, but it's also a balancing act for income and for storage. So right now you are approaching peak storage, which means that if you overflow, that overflow goes nowhere because it's a 1v1. You're not playing against anybody else. You're not playing with anybody else on your team who could benefit from this overflow. And you kind of barely caught it there, but you're not playing with anybody that can benefit from overflow. So that mass is literally just going into the beyond. Like, it's going into the great mass graveyard in the sky where it's not being put to any use. So right now you're overflowing. This is when you need to do one of two things: upgrade initial mass extraction points, or you need to start spamming, and you need to build a lot more factories to allow for that spam. So I would have built another 3 or 4 factories probably in your main base. One air factory is probably adequate, but I would have had probably another 3 or 4 land factories. And I mean, even you're overflowing like plus 13, plus 18. With the amount of mass that you're overflowing, you could be running 4 more land factories in your base and be upgrading this to a T2 max at the same time, without not even breaking a sweat. So that's the economy management is something that's very important in this game. And I think that you are mass stalling later on in the game because you didn't use your early mass effectively. So again, mass stalling is a symptom of a greater cause. Whenever you jump to T2 and your units all of a sudden start costing more, if you don't have the infrastructure set up from the early game to allow for that transition, it can cause you to mass stall. So it looks like right now, to mitigate this, you are using engineers to assist these land factories, whenever really these guys should just be building additional land factories or helping these upgrade. Okay, so we've harped on mass extraction and mass storage a little bit. I want to compare the two bases because whenever I was initially looking at this game, you guys took very different strategies and how you expanded into the map. So you are going for, and I'm saying you as in Depete. So Depete is going for big boom, big expansion. So he's got an engineer taking over this kind of starting location down here. He's capped this, he's capped that, and if I remember correctly, you have an engineer either on its way up there, or he moves up there in the very near future. So you're expanding quite a bit, whereas your opponent, Not Reg, is much more concentrated. He really only holds about a quarter of the map right now, but the quarter of the map that he holds is very concentrated, and he is building additional factories around and in his primary base, and has additional factories that are queued up. So I think that instead of, and you can see he's already got a T2 mass extraction point. Is it just the one? I think it's just the one. But he's got another one on his way. What does his economy look like? Okay, so he's still floating a hell of a lot of mass too. So these bigger maps, it's really easy to float mass, especially whenever you are a newer player getting kind of your handle or your feet under you from an economy balance perspective. Usually you're just kind of taught expand as fast as you can, as far as you can, and but you actually have to use the mass. Like all these mass extraction points, expansion does nothing for you if you don't actually use the mass points. Anyway, so that's talking about economy and the different various strategies. I think that Not Reg's strategy is a little bit more manageable for somebody with lower actions per minute than Depete's is. Depete, I think that your strategy is fine. There's nothing wrong with expanding out, but it does require a little bit more care and feeding and management. Okay, so we got a raid coming in. What does radar coverage look like? Radar coverage is there and there. So it's not good. You will see, well, and you're also power stalling too. So does this even get picked up on radar? So you need another radar station up here. Okay, so it gets picked up on radar, but it's a little too late. These Mantis will take down the hydro. Your power grid is already teetering on the brink of collapse. So yeah, it's going to send you into a power stall. All right, you at least pause your air factory to kind of help mitigate that, but you need more power. Even more than this. Like, you need ideally just ring that air factory, and that'll help you a good amount. Oh, you've already made the jump to tier 2 and immediately go into producing pillars. Okay. I mean, nothing, so I guess nothing wrong with that. What does the queue look like on this factory? Okay, so you have this looping through. This queue is Sparky. Okay, I think this queue is fine after you get some T2 engineers out. I think that the first thing that you need to do with your T2 HQ is push T2 engineers out. The reason being is you need to start T2 power generation. So every tier of power generation that you advance from, so T1 to T2, T2 to T3, each one is more efficient than the last one. So the amount of mass that you will invest in a T2 power generator is going to be more efficient in terms of energy return on that investment than a T1 power generator. So the first thing you need to do is start utilizing that additional efficiency whenever you make the jump to T2, instead of building additional T1 power generators. So you have your T2 land factory cranking pillars right now. And just to give you kind of an example of what the difference is, you can see down here in the bottom, the bottom left, this land factory is using -17 power, while this land factory is using -45 for pillar production. So that's a over 200% increase in power requirements from T1 to T2. And a T1 power grid can sustain like one power generator doing this, or one T2 HQ doing this. But you really need to start making that transition to the T2 power phase as quickly as possible. So I think that's enough on power. Let's see what else we can look at here. I'm gonna bump up the speed a little bit. So units are getting in position. These guys will get crushed. What does your scouting look like? Okay, not great. You also have interceptors over there. Still floating a lot of mass. So again, this mass is just going into nothing right now. And adding T2 production is not a great fix because you don't have the power grid to support all of that T2 production. And so you're building additional T1 power generators here. So, again, I didn't really want to continue harping on the power grid, but yeah, decision to build additional T1 power generators, that's like a band-aid fix. That's not a long-term solution. It's not a long-term energy strategy. A little run by does pretty well there. So you need to be scouting or have radar with your units. I don't know if you have any. Do you have a scout in this unit mix? You don't have a scout in this unit mix, so these guys are going to run into these auto guns. So, I mean, granted, you have T2 units in here, which overwhelms T1 point defense relatively easily. But it's good to have scouts so that you know what you're sending your units into, and they can use their longest effective range. Another little T2 group coming in here. Corsairs coming over the top. So this guy does have air control. And I mean, a lot of this goes back to the point where I don't know if you even have the energy really to support. Okay. All right, so now you're mass stalling. Why are you mass stalling? You are mass stalling because, okay, so this thing's been upgraded. That guy's been upgraded. That guy's been upgraded. That guy's been upgraded. Okay, so you've got 6 T2 factories all cranking right now. And no T2 mass extraction points. So this middle mass stall could have been entirely mitigated by using the mass that you produced earlier in the game to upgrade to T2 mass extraction points instead of just letting it go to waste. If you're floating mass, upgrading to a T2 mass extraction point is a fine way to kind of mitigate that float. You see me use this all the time in ladder matches. At least you're not power stalling though, because you have no mass now. Okay, this is another thing to talk about here. We can drop this down to regular speed. So this is another thing to talk about here. Looks like you made an attack. We've got a series of pillar wrecks, some flapjack wrecks, etc. And you have another attack up here that are, because you haven't scouted what your opponent's forces look like, these guys are running into a battle that they're not going to win and really have no chance of winning. And this is something that I run into, that I do wrong a lot, is I take fights that I can't win because I feel like I have to use my units. That is not the case. You do not have to use your units. Just because you have units here does not mean that you need to send them to their death up here. The reason why is because if we hold Control Shift and look at what the reclaim looks like, I mean, you've gifted him like a T3 mechs, maybe more, in terms of reclaim up here. And we want to try and avoid doing that as much as possible. So just because you have units does not mean that you have to use them right that second. You need to be taking fights that you can either, you are either winning or you are doing crippling amounts of damage, like destroying his power grid or things like that. We're seeing also kind of a more condensed production strategy from our red player. Let's go ahead and bump this up again. So it looks like we got another kind of attack over here that is not going to be winnable. There's a ton of rhinos over there. Corsairs coming in over the top. Do you have interceptors? Okay, so you do have interceptors, but you've only got like 5 of them. Are you producing anymore? No. Are you power stalling? No. Okay. But you are mass stalling, so I mean, again, little decisions from an eco perspective at the beginning of the game have large ramifications later on in the game. And these Corsairs, your interceptors can't really get a good handle on where they are. I don't know whether you're trying to micro those guys or not, but Corsairs are terrible air to air. The only reason why you lost there was because you don't have any radar coverage on the ground, so your guys didn't know what they were shooting at. Went back to observer view. So you built some triads here. So triads, again, represent a mass investment. Everything in real-time strategy games, and this is not unique to Supreme Commander's economy, but in real-time strategy games, everything is... The economies in real-time strategy games do follow economics. So having units sit around and do nothing, that's an opportunity cost, because it's a potentially a missed opportunity for a raid or something like that. Similarly, investing mass into a triad here, especially whenever you are going through a mass stall, this triad needs to have a positive return on investment. And where it's positioned and the support that it has and the army that's out here, I don't think that is going to have a positive return on investment. So you've, I think, put yourself in a situation where that's not going to be ideal. And so see, that triad goes down. You got your northern one still plinking away. But again, the amount of forces here are just way too large. And so again, this is small decisions, at the beginning of the game, have very large ramifications in the middle of the game. So the small decisions that you made to not upgrade to T2 mass extractors, which you are doing now, and so you're playing a little bit of catch up, but the decision or the missed opportunity there to upgrade your mass extraction points to T2 is costing you in the mid game, where you don't have the mass to invest appropriately to defending these triads, where that might have been a perfectly defensible position. Well, I mean, I don't think that's an ideal place to put point defenses, but that might have been a much more defensible position if you had the mass income from the decisions that you made earlier on in the game. So I think that the game ends here. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So game ends here. If I'm going to recap, there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. First off, it's fantastic that you are going back and looking at replays and trying to figure out what you did wrong and fix it. I do this as well. A lot of Supreme Commander players do this, and it's a great way to get better at this game. But I think that the things that you picked out for yourself were symptoms of a larger problem, and the larger problem was the missed opportunity costs or the opportunity costs you incurred by letting that mass overflow and waste that mass at the beginning of the game whenever you were reclaiming. And then you were kind of stuck playing catch up. If you think of this as like, if you think of like your economy as an engine, okay, and that engine is trying to pull a load. So let's say you've got like an inline 4 engine, which is not a very large engine. It's only rated to pull a certain number of pounds. You have the opportunity to upgrade that engine before you introduce a larger load. And I think that you did this backwards. And this is a terrible analogy now that I'm breaking this down. But essentially, you upgraded all of the things that were going to put a drain on your economy before upgrading the things that were going to produce within your economy, which is backwards. So I think that a better way to do it is upgrade your mass extraction points and have like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 mass extraction points before you make the jump to T2. That way your economy can actually handle the additional stress from jumping to T2. Same kind of thing with the power generation. So you've got T1 power generators supporting a T2 economy. These T1 power generators are not designed to output enough juice to sustain these T2 land factories. Matter of fact, you're at the end of the game here. Let's see what you got. 4, 6, 10. We got another 18, 24. Plus a hydro. So 24 times 2. So you have 580 total power generation here at the end. That it can almost all be condensed into one T2 power generator. And so if you had 2 T2 power generators, you would have been able to do things like continue producing interceptors, have more radar stations, and have additional intelligence. So it's again just, I think, I said this a couple times, but essentially what happened was you made a jump to a higher tech level and your economy was not ready for the strain. That's really about all there is to it. And I think that there was ample room in your early economy to upgrade that engine so that it could pull the larger load later on down the line. I'm not going to rehash this over and over and over again. I really appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys have a replay you want me to take a look at, and give it my 2 cents as far as how I would attack things from a replay perspective, send it my way. The easiest way, so I'm revising some of the, I guess, instructions that I've made in the past, but the easiest way actually to do this is going to be either in Discord or the comments. Reason why the Forge Alliance Forever client is not ideal is because chats don't get saved. And so there was an instance a while back, and if you're actually watching, if whoever sent me chats and I didn't respond is actually watching this video, I'm really sorry. That was not on purpose. I heard the chat notification going off on my computer, and so I walked over to my computer and tried to wake it up, and the FAF client just crashed immediately, and those chats are gone. So there's not a great way to save that, and so I don't know if that was a replay ID or if you wanted to play a couple games, but if you're watching this, I'm really sorry. I wasn't ignoring you. The client just crashed on me, and because the chats aren't saved, I have no idea who sent them or what they said. So if you sent me a replay in the past and I have not acknowledged you, because I will thank you in the message, send it to me again, because odds are it was something that I did not receive because the FAF client either crashed on me or didn't save the message, something like that. So putting in the replay ID in the comments below or sending it to me on Discord is going to be the best way to do that, where it can actually be saved on a other area where it's not going to be prone to an application crash. Lastly, and kind of to wrap up, I think this is going to be the last video in my old place. So I'm moving to, I'm filming this on the 21st of January. So we're making the big push, the big move this weekend to our new house. So next video, hopefully, will be from my new setup. I'm going to have a little bit more of a dedicated room for both my home office as well as the kind of YouTube setup. So hopefully I'm going to get into some streaming as well. In the past, it's been both a technical limitation on my computer, which has now been, I believe, alleviated by the video card upgrade, and then a kind of a space limitation with my desk being next to my wife's, and there's just not a great, I would not be able to stream consistently. So that's why I've kind of stayed out of it right now. But that's what's coming from the channel in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.